Hi everyone. So this is working group number 3, Act Local and Mobilize Global, which is part of the Summit of Creative Parties, but as well as ArtCOP21 professional workshop. So we had the session this morning downstairs in the auditorium to start the first discussion that we could have, and I'm seeing myself on the screen. That's so this afternoon we will have a series of 7 different presentations from different parts of the globe, and also my co-moderator will also have a very short presentation on the project she did in Georgia. And to briefly introduce myself, I'm Marie Vol. I work for trans artists at the Dutch Cultural Center for International Cooperation in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. And we have worked for the past 2 years on a project called the Green Art Lab Alliance, in which we had a partnership with 18 organizations throughout Europe and some in Asia as well, where we created a knowledge alliance on art and sustainability to try to bring artists, scientists, and art organizations to work together and to exchange knowledge on this topic on environmental sustainability. And we had 2 lines. One was on exchanging knowledge, and with that we worked with Julie's Bicycle to offer their professional expertise. And we also created and organized Artist Lab, in which different artists took part and developed different type of projects, some dealing with water, some dealing with waste. And it's in this line that I work together with Sofia, because she worked in Tbilisi in Georgia, organizing one of the Gala labs. So I will give the floor to Sofia. She can introduce herself and her project, and then we will move on to the different presentations.
Thank you, Marie, for introducing me. I'm Sofia Lapiashvili. I'm from Georgia. I used to work with the organization GeoAir, which were the partner organization from Georgia for the Gala project. Our project was actually divided in 2 parts. We were not the co-signer partner, but we decided to make as much as we can for the project, and we started with lab part, which was a residency. We had 3 residency, international residencies in Tbilisi. We invited artists who worked with the local artists. I mean, this was really important to engage international artists with the local art scene and to get closer to local situation. And main topic of our project was market. And this market is located in the center of the city, more or less. And there you can find really everything. There you can find second car parts, food, sanitary stuff, whatever. And this market was created very spontaneously in the 90s after the crashing of Soviet Union, and lots of people came out from, in the streets, and they started to sell what they had. So this was created in this kind of style, and now there works many people from coming from rural areas. They don't have jobs there, and they are selling everything what they can. But this is very dirty area, and this disturbs whole neighborhood. And after my presentation, we'll speak partisaning, because they were also invited as a resident for the project. So our main goal was to bring artists in this area and to deal with community, to engage them, and to raise awareness about sustainability and polluting and sustainable environment. After the finishing of the project, I don't work anymore with GeoAir, but I have new plans, which I really want to say to everyone that I'm starting to build up a new structure for children. And it will be like some kind of museum, but really with a strong goal of environmental education. So this, please contact me if someone is interested or someone is in the field, because we don't have anything for children in the city or at all in the country to deal with really small children and educate them in terms of environment and art. So we will need any kind of contacts, resources, please, please, please. Now I will give a floor to Partisaning. I will briefly say about them that this is a group of activists who are dealing with urban changes, urban activism. They are really guerrilla activists, and more about their project they will say themselves. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for first. Yeah, I'm Igor. Here's Mike. We are artists and co-founders, founders of Partisaning movement. It's Partisaning movement in Moscow, and we try to explain very shortly about movements because we have just the 7 slides. And we started 4 years ago. We just opened a website and like media about activism and different socially engaged art, and just try to show some different actions and projects from Russia and around the world. And also we had a print version of not a print version of a kind of newspaper, and we promote this newspaper in exhibition and protest actions and different events. But Partisaning, it's not just a website. It's also for us public with strategically challenge and shape and reinvent urban and social realities. And we try to organize community around our residency. It's a yellow container and collective studio also for making something in the city and for urban planning, for different actions, interventions. Yeah, and we have a kind of 2 art-based partisaning tactics. It's a participatory and engaged people to process about for rethinking about city, and urban intervention. It's just a message about something in the city. And for participatory, we mean collaborative mapping, suggestion, and getting online or offline feedback from citizens, and transform of public spaces by collaborative way. And we work a lot in different cities for making actions like a sport event or researching, grassroots researching. And another tactic, it's urban intervention. It's improve city by illegal way, because legal way it's often it's just a long way for doing something in the city, and we just try to make pedestrian crosswalks or bike infrastructure, or I don't know, different many actions like this, like that. And this case maybe more successful and more good explain about urban intervention way.
Hi, my name is Anton Normeek. So we work together. This is just a project that I started to. So I just started to explore my city for many years on my bicycle, and after a while, and I was really depressed with the situation in society and in the city of Moscow in 2010. I decided to make a DIY cycling map for the city with, and then we started to make DIY cycling paths, and it ended up organizing different events, and we wrote a manifesto, like a alternative master plan for the city. And so we are anarchists, and we think that we need to build our own, counter discourses. We need to work with communities, with people, to actually imagine better world, and worlds, and then we can build them from the scratch, or in our environment, or our cities, our neighborhoods. And yeah, it was just one of the first examples with bicycles. And yeah, this is our website, and yeah, just wanted to comment something we probably listened to today in the morning, that I think we listen a lot about environment, about sustainable development, about all these things, but we see it in Moscow, and in globally we travel, and we see that people keep talking about the same things, using same keywords, and it feels like we all doing something nice and good for the environment. But I think we need to be much more critical about, capitalism, about our society, about different problems in society we have, and I hope we'll have deeper and more critical discussion now. And I think it would be nice to have like shorter discussions, and we'll be able to discuss how can we really change something, but not just pretend we are changing and actually rebranding same things, just the capitalism or all these things we are living.
Just a short comment about last slide, because it's I did it, and it's just an open question for us. So what you should do now, and we just did a lot small urban intervention. Like there is it's me in a special house from illegally cutted advertisement banner, and down on the left it's a guy. Our friend who was fake mayor, kind of mayor of Moscow, and right in right side it's make inside jeep, fake jeep, but it's a bike, but it's a jeep. It's more about critical thing about cars in Moscow.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say about this last project, it's easy to be critical, to be an opposite to the source of power and pretend we are so nice, and we are somewhat opposite to, capitalism or to some oppressive regimes. And for example, we're cycling and we're kind of separate from this oil economy, but I don't think it's really, it's not critical enough, and it's not maybe a real change. And I think it's nice to pretend we are in charge already, or we are from the position of power, and we can probably try to cycle on this car, and then see how people react to this strange transformation from the bicycle to car.
You. So the urban theme is very interesting, I guess, for all of us. We are living in the cities, and The next presentation will be also about urban knowledge. Oops. I will give a floor to Marco Kusumavijaya. Yes, I did it. From Indonesia. He's the director of Ruja Center of Urban Studies. Yeah, about the project will tell us Marco more. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. I worked for a Rujak Center for Urban Studies based in Jakarta. But what I'm going to tell you is our works in a different city where we have what we call Sustainability Learning Center in Yogyakarta. Yogyakarta is a city 1 hour by flight from Jakarta to the central Java. I will pass this, but this is actually an inspiration where we changed from the past 20 years looking at sustainable development as the intersection between the three, which is absurd because there is nothing can happen outside the environment. So I'm glad that in the State of Our Planet report by WWF 2014, they started with this new scheme, new paradigm that economic domain should be within social domain and should be within ecological domain. And our works in our Sustainability Learning Center is trying to put arts in the community and within the ecosphere. Of course, there are many things between the economy and the ecosphere, the national boundaries, the administrative territories, municipalities, etc. And I think that's something that we need to cross over. So we heard early this morning that there is a problem about the use of the word development. I think I would like to define sustainable development as something like this: development that brings changes towards ecological sustainability. So mind you, for me, there is only one sustainability, which is ecological sustainability, and development that helps transition into ecological age. I will pass this. So going directly to our place, which is called Bumi Pemuda Rahayu in the southeast of Yogyakarta. The location is outside the city. It's on the hill, 430 meters above sea level, 1 hour from the city on motorbike. The location is there because after the earthquake in 2006, our colleagues, architects, worked with the community to rebuild their places. The picture is not from that particular village, but this is to say that I and a group of community architects work a lot with urban poor to develop their housing and settlement. But because of that story, when we have this idea, we work with the community to develop our place in their village. Basically, we try to experiment with arts in this place, developing low entropy arts, low entropy crafts, community development based on local skills and materials, organic farming, even new cooking and old cooking, artist residency program. So maybe I will talk more about the artist residency program. I understand the presentation asked for question about strategy. I think the idea is to have a very slow, long-term engagement with our local community, understanding their local cultures. So we have been working there for about 3 years, and I would say that our relationship is still developing very much. We work together to build a place, and also they provide the land. We do open call, and actually the compound itself is physically open. There could be no fences because walking through the private property is one important cultural thing in the village. So we have to let people trespassing our property actually. We try to develop the community's agenda together to make it common agenda. So our art programs also aligned with the community agenda, at least some of them, because of course we cannot fulfill all their wishes and all their agenda. In terms of management, we actually co-own and co-manage the place together with my organization, Rujak Center for Urban Studies, Community Architects in Yogyakarta, and Kunci Cultural Studies Center. So you see there are different interests. My organization is interested in sustainable urbanization. The community architects in Yogyakarta are interested in working with the communities to develop their sustainable settlements, and another colleague from Kunci Cultural Studies Center is interested in cultural studies. We have a mixture of funding, but mostly not based on a strategy. I must say that mostly are based on opportunities that arise during our time of development, which is the reality, I think, in my country, if not also in many other places. So that's the location of our center. So it is really in a very common, ordinary village with a lot of potential as well as problems. Basically, we have facilities for people to stay, and a hall to work and workshop, and also an open theater to perform. So the buildings are trying to be also sustainable with bamboo hall. Again, 99% of the workers who build these places come from the neighboring people, and we have to do training on the job for them to be able to build these places. So they are not from the beginning a skillful construction workers, but some skills are there. So we have to provide training on the job. So one of our residents works, the door is called, a tail door, because it is based on workshop with children that develop stories about their communities, and then the stories are transformed into this glass painting on the door. The people in the surrounding areas already produce window and door frames to be sold. So the idea is the artists come with this idea because he thought, why don't we create more values for the door at the same time also to record the cultural heritage of the community. We also do craft, but the idea is to use sustainable materials, but not only sustainable in the sense that it's durable, it's long, but it's also to improve the quality of the weaving techniques and others. We work together with a Japanese craft person, just to show you a picture of how it works in the city. Another works by the resident artist, in this case an architect, developing a guardhouse for the people. That's why the title is, The Guys Want a Joglo Guardhouse. Joglo is a traditional Japanese structure. For them it is very prestigious just to have a guardhouse made in the model of that prestigious kind of building type. So we try to make it that way. Another works by some theater works, the Peppermoon Puppet Theater, which is now quite famous in the world. They work with the children to develop the stories and then to perform with puppets. The important thing about the puppet, it's all the puppets are made from local basketries that are already made by the people there, and they are kind of restitched or recomposed in different ways using only tying and stitching without any metals or any glues. And it is new thing for the Peppermoon Puppet people to learn to do that. We do videoing cooking, so our videographer, resident artists, try to ask the ladies in the neighborhood to record each other through video works, and then to show them during final presentation. It is funny. For example, if you look at the lower right hand, people are watching the video inside the house from outside. We also do our own furniture using used timber, but also the used timber also used to make musical instruments. The picture on above are actually musical instruments made by a person who are interested in making all kind of musical instruments from all kind of materials. Again, if you look at it, it's a window or a door frame that are made by that guy, but by our artists, it's transformed into a musical instrument. This is an ongoing project. At this time, we have 5 resident artists in the place. They are preparing for their final presentation next week, actually, so I have to go back. With the children again, time is up. Okay, last sentence. The one picture with the red frame is our resident artist. He is 12 years old. He wrote us a proposal asking to stay there for 2 weeks to do bird watching. And he's going to publish a book about that. And he did it with the neighbors, with the neighboring children. So he did workshops in our place, etc. Very, very brilliant person. So that's it. Thank you.
Very, very interesting, especially the last part. Okay, the question will come later when we are done with the presentations. So, and the next speakers will be from China. It is connected also to architecture. I would present Chanfeng Wang, founder of La Nature. It is a family funded or family supported organization, as I understood properly. And it provides knowledge about nature and environment. And the next, or the second person of this session, of the presentation, will be Mu Wei. He's a member of Norwegian Associate Registered Architects, and they will present projects which are done with kids for kids, right? Yeah, please.
Okay, actually, it's my honor to be here, and my colleague Chen Feng, he speaks perfectly German, but really bad English, so basically I will speak, and he will read. It's a long journey from China here, and our topic is very sensitive about kids, so before we talk too much, I prefer we show everybody a short video about our work, and I will count down the time myself. But there's no sound, or do I have the sound?
In China, we have more than 264,780,000 children aging from 0 to 14 years old, accounting for 20.27% of the total population. In 2014, 42% of the total used concrete in the world is consumed in China, while 41% of aluminum is made in China as well. Wuhan, the city which I'm living in, with 1.2 million population, has won the title, the city with the largest quantity of commercial housing delivery in the world, making a record of 1 million square meters. China has experienced unprecedented rapid development in the past 13 years. Large population moved to cities. As a father with 2 kids, I suffered unparalleled pressure. I concern that the kids have been formulated by the society under such pressure, for they are expected either to grow up without making any mistakes, or to obtain knowledge and make achievements beyond their ages. They are fully scheduled by various tutoring courses and weekends. In the one-child policy era, the kids are called little emperor of the family in China. However, we forget a truth. There is only one emperor in each country. Laneta was founded against such background. We organized the initial 4 families aiming at setting up a sustainable community. Now, the community has more than 400 families and it's still growing. We travel to villages to look for healthy and organic foods, through which kids start to know the laws of nature and the preciousness of food. We take kids to hike in nature so they can be aware of the holiness and the greatness of nature. Furtherly, we guide the kids to construct nature architecture, making them the participants of nature and creator of the world. We bring kids to field and encourage them to draw a view of the nature on a piece of cloth, and then we pass the cloth to other cities. We help the kids in constructing micro-building. The structure is part of nature. In this process, kids are not only workers and architects, but also artists and angels. Our kids built a castle in the sky with nature bamboo. They imagined, learned, and constructed all by themselves. Finally, they enjoy the pleasure of creation. The kids of Laneta have won several awards of architecture. They are so proud of themselves when they're standing on the stage together with the biggest. The harmony of nature and human beings is the core of China's traditional culture. We believe that such philosophy can be well integrated into modern urban and social civilization. Just like painting on a white cloth, the kids can sketch out their own future. We expect that these kids can create a better world, just like what they've done at the age of 10 years old.
Well, the video stand, my colleague Chen Feng wrote a very emotional text, so he will read for us.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a big child, 42 years old. Luckily, I have 2 children in my family, a daughter and a son. Before school age, my daughter Emily was very introverted. She often shut herself away in her room and wept a lot. This made me feel very worried. I remembered my happy childhood and decided that getting close to nature might help her feel better. I attempted to lead her into the country, into mountains and forests. I never expected that this attempt gradually evolved into a wonderful voyage. On the way, we were not alone, for many worried parents and their children quickly joined us. In nature, we were really happy. Nature was a great healer, and the magic that inspired me in my childhood worked miraculous changes in Emily. She became cheerful. One day, she even had a fight with a tall boy. Similar change took place in many other children. I knew they were like flowers, now prepared to blossom. Until now, I've taken nearly 6,400 present times of children to the country. We visited forests, valleys, the seaside, and the mountains. We were in extremely cold areas, subtropical areas, mysterious places, and very poetic places. We, children and adult children, created many wonderlands, and the great program that my architect partner introduced just now is among them. These kinds of creations are influencing more and more people in China. One more pavilion or one more clothes had floated around the whole country, the north, the south, the west, the east, and the middle. More and more adults and children are inspired to love nature and the countryside, to concern themselves with the environment that we live in. For adults, maybe the change lies with their logic, but for children, the changes lie in their hearts. I believe the future of this world is to be decided by children, not as adults. Thank you.
Good. I still have 20 seconds. My name is Mu Wei. I'm a professor in design school and architect, and we work together because I believe architecture is more. It's not only a monument. It's a social tool to active communities and to solve social problems, to active the emotional links between different communities. So that's why we work together, and it's not the ending. We just start from the kids, and we try to dig more. Now we are developing kind of a building package, like IKEA building, which can be assembled by the people. So we are going to throw the building packages to the rural area, to the villages. So that's basic we don't have a manifesto, we don't have philosophy. We just believe science or technology can be a very bottom-up tool to solve some problems in China, especially we have the biggest population and the pollution. Yeah, thank you.
The next speaker will relate to some of the topics that we were addressed this morning, actually. So Carolina Caicedo from Colombia works for an organization in rural Colombia, actually, where called Descolonizando la Agua.
Descolonizando la Agua.
And I will let you speak further, since apparently my Spanish is
Thank you. Well, hola a todas y a todos. Hi to everyone here. So I'm part of, through Descolonizando la Agua, which is a collective of young people in a little town called La Agua that is vinculated to a national movement, social movement called Ríos Vivos, which means living rivers, that agglutinates, can we have the slides, please? Oh. That agglutinates affected communities that have been affected by the construction of large dams in Colombia. So the communities that have been affected by the construction of large dams in Colombia are mainly small-scale farmers, thank you, fisherfolk, barqueros, or artisanal miners. There are 3 large dams. A large dam is a dam over 150 meters or higher, recently built in Colombia or in construction, and our work of Descolonizando la Agua is basically located around one of these dams called El Quimbo, which is the first dam constructed by a transnational company in Colombia, by the company Endesa Enel, which is a Spanish-Italian company operating all across Latin America. This is the second of 17 dams planned for this river called the Magdalena River, or in ancestral name we call it Yuma, which means the land of friends, because it's in the river where people would go and meet their friends to do trades. So this is the second of 17 dams over the Yuma River Basin. And this is under a master plan of development of the Magdalena River proposed by Hydro China, which is a state corporation, a Chinese state corporation, also very big globally in terms of dam construction. And it is part of a wider regional initiative called the IRSA, which is the Regional South America Infrastructure Integration Initiative, which is a neoliberal regional plan for the whole South America that looks to connect through hydroways and through roadways the different countries, and the construction of big mega ports also in strategic points for the extraction of resources of the continent. So it's important to also to localize, you know, that little problematic in the middle of Colombia into a wider strategic neoliberal strategy for the continent. And so El Quimbo has displaced approximately 24,000 people. It has flooded 8,200 hectares, which was mainly crops and dry tropical forest, and also there was cattle also in this region. And the ironic thing is that Endesa is going through the process of declaring El Quimbo as a mechanism of clean development, which means that if it gets approved, Endesa could sell carbon credits and start receiving money as El Quimbo as a clean operation. So communities along the Magdalena River or the Yuma River affected by El Quimbo have spoken loud and clear, remaining closely knit as a collective body, holding their ground and refusing to leave the territory or give up their compensation claims, effectively resisting the dismembering strategies that building a dam supposes. They have used their bodies as political tools in marches, mobilizations, road blockades, but also they continue to use their everyday gestures, such as remaining at home or even fishing. These gestures, everyday gestures, have become politicized, and the uncertainty brought by the dam has produced a radicalization of these everyday gestures, which are performed with a different kind of consciousness. And it has also sparked an increasing number of extraordinary resistance and civil disobedience acts in the region. So the sum of everyday gestures and the sum of these extraordinary gestures and actions intrinsic to the social and environmental context of the river is what we call geo-choreographies. So as part of the Rios Vivos that operates mainly in 3 branches, there's like a civil disobedience branch, policy or legal branch, and then an artistic and communication branch, which obviously all of them kind of overlap each other. And as part of the cultural and communication branch, we have done a number of projects with the communities, also looking to involve the younger people in the community, because the affectations of the youth and the children are different to the affectations of the adults, and also kind of preparing them to inherit the struggle, right? Because this is just the second of 17 dams planned, so we have to prepare the kids to inherit struggles. So one of the processes is mural making under the concept of minga, which is a Quechua word, which means collective work, so we do a lot of minga. And also workshops to reinforce the body as a political tool. So different body disciplines, including performance art, contemporary dance, theater, puppetry, circus techniques, and of course workshops around the utilization of audiovisual tools such as cameras, recording devices, photography. Because for us it's important that there is not only a food sovereignty but also a visual sovereignty, and that the stories that are coming out from the communities are told by the communities, and they can decide the way they want to represent themselves. So that's very important for us also. So here are some images of our workshops. And some of these workshops end up in very specific actions that we call geochoreographies also. And these actions are political acts that revert to using the body as a political tool under the notion that the geography and the territory is part of our own body. So the first territory, first and foremost, is our own body, and then the land we inhabit is an extension of this body. It's not just something outside the body. We are against this idea, or this Eurocentric idea of nature, that is something that we contemplate, that we study. No, in indigenous tradition, we are part of nature, and actually we exist, as the compañero from Java would explain, we're inside the ecosphere. It's not something outside, So geochoreography is a psychosocial space performed by the body, individual or collectively, being fully aware of the relationship with its environment. A geochoreography imprints a living image on the territory, producing an expansive motion of the body and its location. And this is very important in Colombia because we have had decades of civil war there, and expanding the body helps to avert fear and to counter physical and psychological displacement. So intimate acts like remaining at home becomes a mechanism of holding the ground when you're about to be expropriated and being displaced, to give way for a dam, right? And fishing, artisanal fishing or washing gold becomes a reaffirmation of the river as a public good, which by constitution is from all the Colombianas and all the Colombianos. And is a strategy to avoid the containing repercussions that a dam can have, and by reclaiming the right to freely navigate and walk along the river. So to continue to grow crops also in spite of the imminent flooding strengthens the community's self-determination, asserting the rights to define their own food systems. So everyday geochoreographies humanize the landscape, countering the dehumanizing a dam or any development project has. So in our geochoreographies, we look into the reappropriate public spaces, and when I talk public spaces, I'm asking you to think about public space in the rural sphere. Normally in the arts, we think about public spaces in urban context, the plaza, the corner, but here we're really looking at what are the public spaces in the rural. How as artists can we intervene in these public spaces, or help find strategies to intervene and reappropriate these public spaces, and also how can we come up with mechanisms that allow for everyone in the community, people from 99 years old to 0 years old, to participate. So these are some of the considerations we have. I'm especially fond of this image. This is a geochoreography where we wrote Ríos Vivos, living rivers with our bodies, over the beach of the Magdalena of the Yuma in La Jagua. So this is our beach in La Jagua. Unfortunately, now that beautiful forest you see there is totally cut out. It's been totally erased to give way for the flooding of the dam. So for us, this image, when we built, one of the strategies also is to generate images that launch a clear message like this one, but that can also support the agendas of the movement in general. So this image has been used in posters, in tweets, in Facebook feeds, has been co-opted also by media, alternative media in Colombia, and has circulated. This was done in June 2014, November 2014, and since then has been circulating widely across social media and different other medias. Another strategy which takes into the audiovisual is to, what I said, produce our own audiovisual documents, and we had a number of them, and also by other collectives in the region. There's been a massive amount of local audiovisual production, so through Descolonizando La Jagua, we decided it was a moment to put them together, and earlier this year, in October, we did the first audiovisual festival for the defense of the territory, where we accumulated around 30 audiovisual local productions, all of this region of Huila, which is, would you call it a department or a state? I don't know how you call them here in France. Like a region, right? And so, because a lot of things would happen is like, though all these audiovisual productions are online, a lot of people or folks in the rural area don't have access, or, are not like us in the city, connected every day, all 24 hours a day. So they don't really have access or the tools to access these documents. So it was important for us to put it, and then we would project in the public space, in the towns, or in community centers, or in private houses where people would come and check out the videos. So the idea is that this becomes a long-term audiovisual festival, and there's one each year, right? To compile the latest productions, local production. So through Más Arte, Más Acción, by invitation of them, we could do kind of a second round of geochoreographies earlier this year. And already looking at where is the next dam going to be constructed, and already kind of put in the bodies in the landscape. Because when you see a development image, you know, normally done by a drone, it's totally devoid of human bodies. So for us, it's very important that the image is full of human bodies in action. And you can see like different moments of the event. It was a one-day event, what we call un sancocho de olla, un paseo de olla. We go to the river, you take a huge olla, a huge pan, cooking pan, and then everyone is asked to bring something to put into the pan, and then something for everyone comes out of the pan. And cooking has always been a central point of agreement, because if you don't find an agreement around the cooking pot, it's very difficult to find an agreement in other levels of decision. And to end, this is a performance already done outside of the region, recently in Caracas, and just finding ways how to communicate this very local problematic and bring it into a global discourse. And also taking into, so just a few things to wrap up. Colombia is the second country in the world after Brazil with environmentalists killed or disappeared. From Rios Vivos, we had 4 compañeros disappeared in the last 5 years. I mean, 1 is disappeared, 3 were killed. So art is a tool that helps repression be lower in a way, because when you do an occupation or a mobilization and you kind of put the blanket of art over it, sometimes police don't know how to deal with it, and repression is a bit, you know, they know very well how to cut through a blockade, but they don't know very well how to cut through a performance, right? And so that's one of the good things about art. The second thing is that, what I said, like how do you start training the kids to inherit struggles? And then for us, one of the premises that maybe, you know, the conversation, there's been a lot of conversation about development, and maybe the compañero earlier from Zimbabwe brought up the word Ubuntu, and in Latin America we have the concept of el buen vivir, which would be sumac causai, and el buen vivir means taking only what we need, instead of thinking about economic growth, taking only what we need from nature instead of thinking about economic growth. Okay, thank you.
So we will move to the next speaker. This is an artist, Matthew Biederman, who is also connected to the nature, as I understood, and he's representing an initiative, Arctic Perspective Initiative. So, please.
Thanks. And I'd just like to say thanks to Coal and Gaîté, lyrique for getting us all together and learning about everybody's different projects. It's been a great morning, and I look forward to the rest of our time together. So I'm going to talk about a project, and I'm sorry for the people who I have my back turned to. It's a funny way to give a presentation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that I've been working on together with a large group of people. It's sort of an open organization, nonprofit, art, science, engineering, aeronautics, cartography, biologists. All these people have come together with different ideas and projects to work on in the north, but also to bring back knowledge to the south. There's been a lot of exchange, of course, where Southerners come to the north, and we've talked a lot about the global south, and I have news for you all, like if you go far enough north, we're all in the south. We're in the south now, in fact. So at any rate, there's been a lot of knowledge exchange and a lot of ideas that have come from the south to the north that try to implant kind of their ideas of civilization there that have miserably failed. So API tries to kind of reverse that trend and tries to understand technologies and nature from a northern perspective, because I think that there's a lot we can learn from the ideas and technologies and ways of being in the world that can translate to southern ways of being that might be a little bit more healthy, let's say. And I'll just give a little bit of a history of where we come from. I mean, it's a very long story, but we've done work in Antarctica. It started with a project to do a sustainable mobile artistic lab in Antarctica. It started even earlier than that, but we'll work with the extreme environments anyways. And we wanted to build this sort of pirate station in Antarctica, and we were an official project of the IPY, the International Polar Year, and did some work down there, but simultaneously began looking at the north, thinking that maybe it would be a bit easier to do some testing and materials testing and projects there. And we came to realize and understand and meet people there, and it became a much more, the north for us now as Arctic Perspective Initiative is a much more interesting, fertile ground where we have collaborators and there's much more exchange. And as you can see, in 2010, this was our second trip out on the land. We were invited with a group of elders and youth to travel to traditional places where people had lived before they were forcibly made to live in villages in northern Canada as a way of sovereignty, I suppose, over the land, so that Canada could say that we actually owned all of the north, so by making actual towns there. And so what we did, we were invited to go to these traditional places where actually the Inuit of northern Canada, who are a semi-nomadic people traditionally, would hunt, live, and survive, and do all that they do. So there we were, on this trip, I mean, we were the only sort of southerners there. And what we wanted to do is to create these ideas of exchanges, or, I mean, what we went there with our idea was that it was an open slate. We didn't come with any idea to do a particular project. We just wanted to talk and get to know people and understand what it meant to be on the land versus living in villages, and maybe what we could sort of dream up together. And one of the things that was constantly talked about, and now these kinds of ideas, is indigenous sort of traditional knowledges, you know, have been repeated. And here, this is Inuit Kayuma Yatakangit. Everybody kept talking about IQ. And we said, this is a really funny concept to keep bringing up people's IQ. And then they finally said, no, it's Inuit Kayuma Yatakangit. And then they explained this whole way of being. And I sort of, because I come from kind of a science, art, science, technology, geek world, I started to look at this Kayuma Yatakangit as a technology, in fact. I mean, as a way, it's a technique, it's a way of surviving, and it's a way of being with other people. And so for me, it's, I understand it as this. There are these bigger laws, and then these, I won't force you to listen to me read them off, but you can see that this is a very interesting way of understanding the world and being kind of a part of a larger community, and also being within sort of nature. And this is, interestingly enough, this is written into the constitution of Nunavut. And Nunavut is the largest land claim, indigenous land claim in the world in terms of square footage. So there's some very interesting geopolitical situations there. I mean, API is not necessarily a climate change project. It's more about, and what does it become? It's been so many years now. It's about a lot of things, but it's about trying to understand how we can move forward in the world with all of its complexities. And that means geopolitical complexities, environmental complexities, economic complexities, and yeah, imagine a new future. There's an Italian designer that's written a very interesting book, Enzo Manzini, Design When Everyone Designs. And what he talks about is a lot of alternative strategies of being in the world and thinking about what's valuable to us. Like, is it the television set that we all need, the flat screen TV or the laptop? And his thesis is that we need to start thinking about true value as being happiness, health, and each other, and knowledge sharing and exchange. And so we try to embody those kinds of ideas with these projects. And so after this 2 weeks out on the land in these traditional places and discussions with elders and young people and middle-aged people like myself, we started to develop this kind of schematic of different sorts of systems to be more sustainable and kind of imagine a re-nomadization of the land. And while that's kind of a loaded term, I fully understand that. It's the only way I can think of is to be able to go out on the land and be comfortable and still be connected to all those things. Because, you know, we're talking, at least in the Arctic, a generation of people who were born in some people were born in a sod hut or an igloo. They only knew their immediate family, and now they have Facebook pages, you know. And so in one generation, it's gone from, you know, a core group of 6 or 8 people to being connected to the world, and nobody wants to go back to the old ways, right? I mean, we can't think of culture as this kind of thing we need to preserve and turn into a museum, but how to move forward, but still retain these kinds of things like Inuit Kaimayata Kangit, or using like things like a drone, which my colleague Marco Pelhan has designed with some of his own colleagues, and we use this to do cartography on the land. We brought this with us on the first trip to actually demonstrate it and get design ideas about how it could be used in the north, and we're using it now with a reindeer herder, Sami reindeer herder in northern Finland. Thank you very much. It produces images such as this. This is one of the spots that we went to. This is it's a 6-centimeter resolution or so. Was a kind of a ideal utopic place that was created in the 1970s by a Jesuit priest, where they actually had a farm and a windmill to generate electricity and things like that. But unfortunately, the priest got sick and was called back, and the families sort of ended up back at the kind of forced location of Igloolik. This is just sharing some of these images on the land on that first trip. Another thing that we developed, or an idea that was shared with us, and some of the things that we noticed, especially in going to different conferences around the South, like places like this, or scientific conferences, was that oftentimes it would be researchers that, you know, are well-funded from the South that go north with their fancy gadgets and lots of money, and they take the stories, they take the knowledge, and while it's shared publicly, it's not put in a forum or a form that's easy to read from the people who have actually shared their stories. So one of the things we developed is this box, is Sinuni, and this will be the last thing. I did hear my alarm. And it stands for Silimilu Nunumulu Nipliraruti, which means a device for recording the land and weather. And it's basically an open system box that records images, voice, data. So in fact, people in these villages can do their own research. And so when a researcher shows up in the south, they can say, oh, well, we have 10 years of data on that, or we can tell you where the animals are, and it creates these maps, such as this. So this one was created just during some tests of ours after several years of development, where they've recorded traditional place names to repatriate instead of, Prince William Island, it's, one Caribou Island. So it can be used for all sorts of things, and it's open. It can be developed, further developed, and it's this, these kinds of open source designs that we try to use. So I suppose with that, I will leave it. We've done conferences, published books. We also do then exhibitions in the South to sort of bring stories, our own stories and our own interpretation of things that are positive that are happening in the North to tell them about the South, because typically we only get the sad stories, the tragic stories, and it's a lot more of a complex relationship than that. And I suppose in the discussion we can then talk about how these kinds of, I'd like to talk about how these kinds of different strategies can then maybe influence both artistic and cultural, like where's the crossover and what are the ethics behind that, because those are some of the issues I'd like to tease out.
Thank you, Matthew. Thanks a lot. The next presenter is Flannery Patton from the Alliance of Artist Communities, which is a network of artist residencies in the US. And I don't know when the cohort started, Flannery, 2008? Yeah, no, the Alliance, yeah, the Alliance is 25 years old, but for a couple of years I've started a cohort of residencies working with the environment in the US, so for the past 5 years more or less, and I have also a few members internationally, so one of them being Bamboo Curtain Studio in Taiwan, with some representative here, and so Flannery will speak more about the different models of residencies existing in the US which work directly with the environment and also with local communities.
Thank you, Marie. Hello, everyone. My name is Flannery. I'm from the Alliance of Artist Communities. And I'm so happy to be here today looking at the ways that residencies in our network are not only fostering sustainable practices, but also supporting artists in environmental projects has been a growing focus of our work and something that we're really excited about looking at best practices in. It's actually one of our impact areas this year. And we're starting to tease out different ways that we can help support residencies in not only engaging sustainable practices and thinking about their own practices, but also supporting all of the projects that we hear here today and supporting different types of work by artists. So when I first tried to put together this presentation, it became this epic, like 45-minute love letter to residencies, and I was just like listing projects and pictures, and I just couldn't figure out how to navigate through them. So I wanted to just sort of go through some areas. Maria was mentioning that we have an arts and ecology cohort, so that's a sub-network within our international network, which is about 400 residencies. So the arts and ecology cohort are all residencies that are actively engaging this intersection of arts and ecology. So I wanted to, for the purposes of this presentation and having 10 minutes, talk about some of the different types of residencies that are operating within this cohort, all of who are sort of supporting these initiatives in different ways. So the first one that I am sort of calling hybrid arts and ecology centers. These are places that have a dual mission of supporting either an environmental stewardship or they have a working farm. So they have a dual mission focused on arts and ecology. So the first one, A Studio in the Woods, is in New Orleans. Their organization is not only tasked with the artist residency program that they have, which has been running for many years. It's partnered with Tulane University, but also with preserving the bottomland forest, where they're located in New Orleans. So they actually have a full-time environmental curator on site. He's been working there for about 10 years. And his job is all around not only sort of this environmental stewardship initiative, but also connecting artists to place. So I think that's something really interesting that we see in these residency projects that are hosting national and international artists, is really finding ways to connect these artists with a place that maybe they haven't been before, or, you know, at the very least don't have a understanding sort of the local ecologies and environmental questions of that area. The other two listed here are Worm Farm Institute and Grin City Collective. These are both residencies that are on working farms. So there's this natural connection between the artists doing their work in residency and sort of being side by side with a working farm, and really sort of understanding this relationship to place and to the land, actually physically working the land while in residence. So the next type of program that we're seeing, so these are actually not coming out of art centers. These are coming out of science or ecological centers that are really understanding the role that artists can play in sort of interpreting the land and teasing out these environmental challenges, and also in engaging their various communities and audiences in these issues. So the top one is the Schuylkill Center. They have something called the Land Lab Residency, which actually gives artists the time and space to make physical changes to the forest. They get about 6 million visitors every year, so the artists are outside working in these public lands during the day, and these projects that they're doing are actually directly confronting an environmental challenge. So in this one, Jake Beckman is responding to a lack of fungi in the forest, and these sculptures that he makes that kind of look like beehives, they actually slowly decompose into the earth and renew the local fungi populations in the forest. Right below that is the Anchorage Museum, the Polar Lab program. So again, a natural history museum connecting artists with their resources, their scientists, the other groups that they connect with, as well as their community through the museum, and really allowing artists to experiment, think about the future of the North, use all the resources of the museum to do these projects. And then the last type of residency that I wanted to talk about were thematic residencies. We're seeing more and more of this type of residency, especially at traditional retreat centers. The Rauschenberg residency has actually had a pretty strong role in ArtCOP. They have a couple projects here. Mel Chin and Gretel Ehrlich did The Arctic Is, which is a project that they premiered last night, but they'll also have a presentation here on Sunday. And this came out of a residency called the Rising Waters Confab. This was bringing together artists and scientists from throughout Florida as well as nationally to come together and really think about how rising waters will change our future. The residency was made particularly sort of immediate by the fact that the Rauschenberg residency is on the site of Robert Rauschenberg's home, and it's on Captiva Island, which at its highest point is only 5 feet, meaning in the next 100 years, it'll be completely underwater and the residency will no longer exist. So having this thematic residency at this time is very important for them, sort of this meta layer. Santa Fe Art Institute's thematic residency on water rights going on right now. Actually, the application deadline is in 2 weeks, if anyone's interested in applying. They've been doing thematic residencies for the last 3 years and really bringing in the community, experts, folks from around New Mexico to work with these artists on issues of social and environmental importance. Okay, so that was a whirlwind tour of the types of programs that we're working with and ways that we're seeing residencies engage at this intersection of arts and ecology. So I just wanted to quickly stop on this slide to just briefly mention why are residencies a good platform for this work. And I think these are interesting not only for sort of best practices for residencies or the role of residencies, but these are important things for all of these projects and all of our institutions. So residencies are research and development labs for the arts. They really allow this time for experimentation separate from outcome. So someone today, this morning, asked a question about funding that is always attached to outcome, and I think something that will always be very important about residencies is that they allow this open time for experimentation separate from outcome. Why is this time important? One is having people together, scientists along with artists, along with ecologists, having time for connections not only between people, but connections with the land. So I think something for residencies that's always been sort of a source of identity has been their connection with place. And when, especially with environmental work, when artists are coming to these residencies, having an organization who has sort of grappled with this relationship to their place and local ecology since their beginning, it brings this amazing ability to really orient someone to the ecology in the local area. The Institute for Sustainable Living, Art and Natural Design, which is one of our residency programs, shorthand called Island, has 30 questions to connect you with place, which is something that they give not only to artists, but to community members. Things like, what is the first wildflower to bloom here, point north, simple and hard questions that really ask people to actually think about where they are. So this quote that I've chosen to include is a mouthful, but I'll let you read it, or I'll read it. So this is by Randall Koch. He's the former ED of Sitka Center for Art and Ecology. And he says, residencies offer the secure, trusting environment capable of giving the resident the confidence to risk, get intimate and vulnerable to a place, and this kind of experience may provide the context in which revelation and transformation can lead to the unique observations and the kind of understanding that ecology requires. So again, total mouthful, but I think what he's getting at is in order to do these projects well, you really have to build in this understanding of place. So I've gone way too slow, but very quickly, I just wanted to mention McCall Center for Art and Innovation is an incredible model of supporting artists in this work, and part of why they're incredible is the level to which they engage communities with these artists. So this is Aurora Robson from Project Vortex. She is doing work intercepting the waste stream and looking at the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So she was in residence in 2014, and through McCall Center's model, she was able to connect with various communities in Charlotte, schools, parks and recreation departments, public housing, as well as engage in many different ways. And maybe we can get to these and the importance of them in the discussion. All right, so I'll end there.
So we have one last presentation, and then we will come to the question and answer. The whole day has been running a bit late all the time, so I thank you already very much for your patience, and sorry for the noise before. We tried to calm it a bit down, so I think it will be fine for now. So without further ado, you might need to help me.
Citabilem Lotzwa, yeah. So I will say a few words. She is a director of the Tangimi Foundation and producer and artistic director of the EFAA platform and the former Secretary General of the Res Artists. So please.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm very tired, so forgive me if I close my eyes. I just arrived. It's a pity I missed all the wonderful talks, but I'm here tomorrow, so I'm happy to be here. Like she introduced me, my name is Tabile Mlotshwa. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, but I'm based in the Netherlands now for more than 15 years. For me, it is I don't have images of the work that I do because I didn't have enough time to prepare. I just came from Korea. But if you check IFA Art Platform, you will get all the information about what we are doing. In short, before I say a few words about, in response to the questions that they sent to me, I run a foundation. I'm an artist myself and a curator. And I founded Gaîté Foundation 10 years ago. So this year we are celebrating 10 years. And Gaîté has an artist in residence in the Netherlands and has managed to date to give more than 450,000 euros worth of grants to support the mobility of artists. And the nice thing of it is that I finance the Gaîté Foundation through selling my own work in order to support artists. So I'm very proud of the work that I've achieved with the foundation. But besides that, we initiated the project called IFA Art Platform, which has become a very big platform now. I'm running around the world because we are realizing 60 IFA platforms. But we launched it a few weeks ago in Paris, and artists are currently in residence at SAR in response to the terrorist attacks that happened in Paris. So we are actually, I haven't slept. Anyway, I'm very happy to be here and feel proud and honored to speak to you about the work we are doing, especially after the attacks. To me, what happened in Paris is happening in other parts of the world, shows the urgency and need for culture to intervene. For IFA, art, a vital part of culture, gives power to the human voice, able to influence change. Art, through different forms of expression, has the power to address human suffering and injustices caused by greed, war, migration, social divides, and poverty. Art has the power to fight against climate change by creating ecologically conscious societies, as change begins in the mind. Art has the power to build sustainable solutions from the people, by the people, one community at a time. Art has the power to heal the world. Art has the power to heal the world through the unremitting power of culture. However, when we do not safeguard culture, whose strength is in creating conscious societies, we pave way to chaos, fear, and societies with no meaning, and in so doing, create a devastating domino effect, resulting in the current state of things. In rethinking art as a medium for citizens' actions 3, I decided to share with you one of our major IFA long-term undertakings focused on realizing projects that are community-based in order to ensure sustainable solutions. The title of my talk is IFA 2015-2016 Project Phase 1 Towards Sustainable Solutions. The IFA project, taking place in 60 countries, starting this year in Paris at Cité des Arts with a residency program, is an ephemeral space of encounter that responds to the now. Realized in Paris as a response to the fight against climate change, IFA seeks through culture to reflect now and to bring to the attention of our leaders the urgent need to put culture at the heart of the fight against climate change. Because to fight against climate change is not possible when we do not fight social degradation, which is linked to environmental degradation. For IFA, culture is the key in addressing our global challenges, which are both environmental and social. With this, it is not possible to adequately combat climate change without addressing the root of the problem. IFA believes that the role of culture, currently overlooked by policy and decision makers, is the missing key in addressing, tackling, and solving the urgent environmental and social issues, including ensuring sustainable solutions based on a bottom-up approach. In rethinking art as a medium for citizens' actions 3, can different forms of art encourage sustainable bottom-up approaches by working closely with local communities? If yes, how can partnerships be developed that support community engagement on environmental challenges and sustainable development. To answer this question, I would like to present the project that we are currently working on under the theme Looking into the Future, Our World, Our Common Home. The purpose of this major project is to address the global society on the current state of things. We aim to create platforms that both raise awareness and enable debate, as well as establishing ground-up sustainable solutions that use art as a mechanism to change the collective consciousness. Starting in Paris during the World Climate Summit, the project will travel to 60 countries, bringing more than 2,000 multidisciplinary artists together with scientists, politicians, educators, business leaders to tackle the most pressing global issues. The project I would like to share with you is the one IFA 2015-25 projects done in partnership Monastery Benedictine de Mambre, which we started in 2014 during Yango Biennale in Kinshasa, Congo. The Benedictine de Mambre Monastery is situated in the region of Mongafula in Kinshasa. It is a priory whose work is vital for the livelihoods of more than 80,000 families. The monastery includes a small hospital, a maternity wing, a small school for basic education, an agriculture school, fish farming school, palm oil production, animal husbandry, a social center, tailoring center, a center for solidarity, an alphabetization center, a nursery, and a nursery for tree planting in the fight against deforestation and soil erosion. How we came to the Mambre story. I was invited in 2014 by the late Kiripi Katembo Siku, an acclaimed filmmaker and producer and photographer who died this year from malaria at the age of 36, with the purpose, together with him, to produce through IFA the first edition of Yango Biennale in Kinshasa, Congo, DRC. Kiripi was concerned about the crisis Congo is currently in, and with this, believed that culture was the key in solving urgent challenges Congo is currently facing. The takeoff point of the first edition of Yango Biennale questioned the expressive characteristic that Congo offers, starting by looking at the rich cultural history and abundance in natural resources that Congo is, and that Congo is one of the most culturally diverse countries in Africa, with 450 tribes, languages, arts, and cultures. Presented to the world as one of the most important countries for the maintenance of environmental balance and biodiversity on the planet, the DRC is a true source of inspiration and a well of ideas, concepts for creators and peoples worldwide. In realizing the Biennale, Kiripi found this particular personality of Congo as the center of all its misfortunes, the contrast between a natural paradise and at the same time a hell for its people. IFA's task as co-producer of this Biennale was to challenge the artist to interpret and question the reality of Congo within the theme going forward, including its history, wealth, and its future in relation to the world. The focus of the Biennale was mainly to address the role of culture in development, addressing the main situation of the urban and the natural environment, the position of women artists in the cultural production in Congo, the situation of cultural education and its relation to cultural heritage, issues related to the creation of a culture industry with a specific focus on contemporary art in Congo, and finally, the role of public participation in strengthening cultural development. The main objective of the Biennale was to involve the local population in the development of its city, with the belief that community engagement would result in collective responsibility in facing socio-economic issues of the country. In order to engage the local community in realizing the Biennale, I began to have dialogue with local people in order to understand their view on the crisis in Congo. What struck me in the many conversations I had with the different people was that nothing is produced in Congo, which in turn makes life very difficult and very expensive. The other challenge I discovered was that people do not buy clothes or shoes made by designers in Congo, but rather buy Louis Vuitton, Valentino, Gucci. As a result, local designers are forced to put made in Italy labels as to be able to sell to local people with little to no success. I also discovered through these conversations that there were farms outside Kinshasa who produced fruits and vegetables, but that due to not having roads, all the produce got rotten, and as there is no way this food can come into the city. It became evident to me that the Biennale's main objective to involve the local population in the development of its city had to begin by addressing the real local problems that local people were facing, including together with the people, finding solutions to these problems. This is how I discovered the existence of the monastery in Mambre, whose lands provide the bread feeding the city of Kinshasa with almost 20 million inhabitants. I made contact with Father Clement to introduce the Biennale and our objectives. Father Clement was very happy to hear about the Biennale and immediately invited us to come to the monastery. The interest Father Clement had in the Biennale was knowing how the exhibition would touch directly or contribute to the local community and its context, because for him an exhibition which did not address the local context had no added value. It is with this reason that IFA began developing collaborative projects with monastery in order to build a bridge that would facilitate exchange between local communities and interdisciplinary artists, scientists, architects, and business in order to directly respond with the community to local challenges. The monastery in Mambre offered 15 residency spaces for artists taking part in IFA 2015-2025 project, and to the artists taking part in the next editions of Yango Biennale. The monastery in Mambre gave the spaces on condition that all the cultural projects taking place at the Mambre Artist in Residency had to address local problems, including finding sustainable solutions done in collaboration with local people. For Mambre, alternative and integrated solutions using culture as a medium are urgently needed in order to address local challenges, among them deforestation, soil erosion, and poverty. Since there is no school in Mombata, the people living in Mombata cannot read or write. As a result, they are not aware of the impact tree cutting has on their environment. Due to the need to survive, local chiefs get bribes for allowing villagers to cut trees. The monastery in Mambe realizes now that as long as there is no alternative, deforestation will never be prevented. For the monastery in Mambe, education and culture play a vital role in creating conscious and responsible societies. The partnership between IFA and monastery in Mambre is formed based on these values. So the projects we are now realizing, which already began in Paris with the other artists in Congo, is that we've come to an agreement and offer together with the monastery 5 projects which are financed. They've managed to finance for 90,000 euro the realization of 15 fully funded residency programs for creators from all over the world interested to work with local communities in order to tackle local challenges. And the second project we realized is the IFA Sustainable Solutions Award, given to artists who are socially engaged in order to enable them to continue the work that they are doing. And 2, we are now building 2 schools that will result in creating conscious societies, including contributing to poverty reduction, which is the cause for the tree cutting for human subsistence. And the 5th thing we are doing is building residency programs, not only in Congo, but we are now going to, from 2015 to 2020, we are building 10 residency programs that are done in collaboration with local people in order to tackle the urgent challenges that they are facing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for all those very diverse presentation. I think, yeah, it's a lot of food for thought for everyone on us, and well, I think for the both of us, it's a bit difficult to go on from there to really find all the different angles that were touched upon. So, in terms of logistic, we have still 1 hour to go in any case, with questions from the audience and from all of us as well. There is just one thing. There will be, at 4:45, there will be reporters from the 2 other sessions that are taking place at the same time, where you will hear what was discussed in terms of green processes, green processes versus green content, and on the funding models. So we have in any case 45 minutes now for any question from the audience, and since I don't see most of the people, please just stand up, come to us if you have questions, or grab the mic from me, it's also fine. I actually don't mind. Yeah, to start with, in any case, Mathieu, you raised an interesting point at the end of your presentation to talk about art, culture, and ethics as well. And I think when we touch upon the question of residencies, so I mentioned it very briefly, I work for trans artists, and we work on the topic of residencies on a daily basis. We map residency programs for the world. And one question that I find quite interesting, especially when it comes to dealing with local communities, is what kind of role can a visiting artist play? Because you come for a certain amount of time. Normally, you go back to your own community, you go back to your own country. I know, Carolina, you went with Mama as a resident artist in the first place, but you continued, no? Okay. Wait, take a mic.
Actually, I've already been working with the community, and the residency proposed by Mama was to go anywhere I wanted, so I decided to go back to that community, you know. So take the chance to keep on kind of hitting the same nail. Yeah.
Which I think is interesting in the point that I wanted to make. Also, how do you deal with working with a certain community, and and this is a question for all of you. I don't necessarily have anyone specific in mind, but how do you deal with working with a certain community if you come only from time to time there, and how can the community still want to be engaged with you also?
I mean, I can answer that a little bit. I mean, one thing that we try to do within our sort of paradigm is to be there as much as possible, but we also know that we couldn't do what we do without actually coming back and to where we live and work from. But it's also, like, it became apparent to us that it's, you know, it's a very difficult thing to engage with a community, and that's why our project has never stopped. And I don't foresee a time when it's going to end, because it's sort of when you start to work with people and really work with people and not just sort of pull bits and pieces and sort of visit and then escape back to your studio with a one-time thing, then you can't stop. I mean, it's sort of, 17 dams, you know, to deal with, and by the time they build those, there'll be something else, you know. So it's an ongoing process, and so this is, I guess that's kind of what I was alluding to with a lot of projects where artists go and visit an exotic locale and come back with a romantic story. It's kind of, I have a hard time understanding those things. I mean, myself.
Yeah, and then just to continue the conversation about language, like I earlier raised the term development, and I would like to raise the term expedition, because expedition, carries. The expedition is a figure from colonization, and we all know that colonization was a scenery of death, right? And of murder, and of expoliation, and erasing of indigenous cultures. And we are continuing, you know, if you're thinking about an expedition nowadays, there's always going to be implicit violence in that word for a lot of people. And in practical terms also, to visit a place as an expeditionary, even if you're an artist, you know, there's an implicit violence there. So I think we do need to revise, because otherwise we are going to lose trust in language. And that's what's happening with all these conversations right now around climate change, and you were referring to that also. We speak and speak and speak, but we don't do. So what happens is that we lose trust in language, and the potence of language, the potence of a word, is lost. So we have to revise, I think, that language, and that has to be paired with our ethics also as citizens, first of all, and as artists also. It's very difficult to stop working with a community once you're engaged. And once you have a true relationship to the land, as you were saying also, no? So in terms of the questions you had posed about how to how to facilitate a long-term or sustainable relationship, I think funding structures sometimes don't allow for you to return, or are always looking for the new thing, no? Instead of looking at processes that exist already and supporting those processes that exist, instead of calling an artist to do new work into this new place. It's very difficult to generate long-term processes this way.
In this regard, I know that one of the residency you mentioned, the one in Alaska, they provide the artists coming to the residency with, if I remember well, it's a total amount of weeks that they can spend over a long period of time. So then you can come and return many times for you to really actually develop your project, develop the relationship with the community, develop the idea that you want to bring and work with. So in this sense, there are also certain organizations trying to play around the funding structures to make sure that the money...
Or why don't facilitate residencies in your own place? Like, there's always money for traveling, but there's no money for an artist to do residency in their hometown. Yeah. So that should be important, because you have a true relationship. You really know where you're working at. So I don't know, that could be another structure that we can think about.
One other thing, just logistically, with the residencies, and I was hoping to get into it a little bit with the McCall Center for Art and Innovation, but we're seeing it with other residencies as well, is not only what Marie was talking about, allowing the artist to come back time and time again. McCall Center has some artists who've returned 3 or 4 times to check in on the project, to do another wave of the project. And another sort of strategy that they have that I think is really nice is they stagger their artists, so the projects are actually building off each other year after year. And this is something that the community knows, that every year 3 environmental artists in residence are going to be in the community. And because of how McCall Center has structured their partnerships, there are very clear ways that the community is engaging each time. So there's curriculums in the school each time that differ depending on which artist is there. There's open studios. There's always a public project. They actually have a arts and ecology campus that McCall Center runs that's in the middle of an abutting neighborhood. So there's actually this visible sort of manifestation of these artists coming and this work that builds off each other. So it's not, I mean, that doesn't totally answer your question about sort of one artist relationship with their project and with the community, but I think in terms of building that trust in a community, having these projects that sort of continue on over time, and the community knows who, what to expect, and has these multiple levels of engagement over time, and it happens every year. I think that helps with funding too.
How my foundation deals with that is an example is when we started a partnership with one organization in South Africa, Africa Center, because they were interested in developing, because the biggest problem in the African continent are funding structures to finance the mobility of artists, actually for everything. And so we joined forces in co-financing residencies. But what I observed is that while we joined forces to finance the residencies, artists leave the continent, but there was nothing happening. Even to this day, there's nothing happening within, because all the top artists, they are going out because the financing is outside and not within. So to solve that problem, I started not only to just finance the artists to come to Europe, but to also follow their process and to propose that they too develop initiatives within their own communities, and including financing together with the other partners, co-financing with the artists, the development of projects happening within their communities. And as a result, that is why now we're able to build all these residency centers, because the same artists we've been working with are coming back and they want to actually develop residency programs or initiatives within their own communities. And now we are facilitating the processes with half the money, because they are taking a part of it and other partners are taking a part of it, which is possible.
I just want to try to break this circle and try to involve the people a bit outside. I see Iris from Bamboo Curtain Studio in Taiwan, and have done amazing work on art and environment and working with the local community. And I know there's been a lot of effort put into that to work also with, well, local artists, national artists, to make sure also that the local artists that go abroad, they come back. I don't know if they work necessarily on the environment, but in any case, yeah, so the environmental program and the residency program are really combined, and I would really like if you could, yeah, say a few words about it in any case.
Hello everyone, my name is Iris and I'm from Bamboo Corner Studio from Taiwan. And actually we are running artists in residency for more than 8 years. And I would say, like, because when you mentioned about there are lots of international artists who come to our studio and they spend like 2 months or 3 months residency and they do research with our local community. And actually everyone, well, you have done the project with the community, you know that it's too short to work with them, especially in terms of the foreign artists. They come to this area, they are quite unfamiliar with it. So we as a platform, actually we help them a lot to kind of go into the community to work with them. But on the other hand is that in terms of the community, they also think about, because the artists always come and go, and they also feel a little bit kind of insecure as well, because they want to, artists always want to dig out more like problems or like what the people, local people are think about. But then once they finish the project and they let go, and there's another artist come and to ask it the same question, basically. They always want to know what's the history before and what's the background before. So then it becomes a kind of problem for us as well in terms of the platform, because then it's hard to kind of discuss with the local community, because they always say, why everyone is like coming like more than like 20 times like each year, and we have to say again and again, but there is nothing happening. So like before, so then we have to talk with our artists. They will tell them before what other artists used to do before, and we give them some information, and from their point of view they can give different idea than to cooperate with the community. So then, and another hand is that we are dealing with a lot of environmental issues as well, because we are living in kind of we are quite close to the center, to the urban, but also a little bit far away from the urban, from the city as well. And we have a lot of pollution problem in terms of the water pollution, because mainly it's because of the domestic waste. So we kind of cooperate with a lot of artists to work with us, and then we go to the community to bring their awareness, because we always believe the artists have the, what do you call it, some kind of civil, responsibility toward to the society, so they can bring awareness to everyone. And then, but artists, we are not specialists. We cannot do everything. We cannot deal with all the problems. So we have to cooperate. So we always believe that we have to cooperate with cross-discipline, like the government, and also the engineer, the technicians. Then we cooperate together and we do things together. So that's basically what we are doing. And I think like maybe tomorrow our founder Margaret, she's also going to have the speech, and she can tell you guys more about what we are doing and what our focus. Yes.
The question I also wanted to raise about for the artists and institutions who are dealing, especially in public space, how do you deal with the official bodies or governmental bodies or the private sector whom belongs to the space? I mean, you have to somehow, no? Yeah, who will start, please?
I think you don't deal with it at all, probably.
No, sometimes we give expertise to the government, to the local government. Yeah. Say it again.
Like this.
You mean that when you deal with a local government, do you mean the city directly, or which? Yeah, can you tell a bit more about it?
So yeah, I mean we just try to work with people. So I don't believe that we can actually represent some other people's voices. we can represent our own voices. And I don't like to pretend I can work with community. I think we need to become a community, and then from like being part of community, then we can do something with it. And if you're like just living somewhere, you just try to get some money to live and then to improve the environment around you, infrastructure, and then, I don't know, you can work at the cafe, making coffee, cleaning up tables, and then out of this you can then at the night improve something else, clean something else on the streets. And yes, and sometimes if it becomes, at some point it becomes visible, media start to write about these things, and then government, they want to use your interventions to pretend they're like it's a good government and it's happening everywhere, and then they try to, and companies, brands, they try to use you. I mean, with all the social movements, it's happened like this, with the human rights movement, LGBT rights movement, climate change. I mean, it starts with something grassroots, and then it become the use to discipline society and to actually, so I mean, even term sustainable for what? It's just basically we're like spoiling the whole world, living in a Western world, but I'm from Russia, so I'm somewhere in the middle. So we're not really exploit anything, and we don't actually have production to spoil the environment, but still. And then we see, like from France, we see how like something really bad happened around us, and then we want to keep like being like an epicenter of the whole world, and we want to exploit other people in other countries, and then we need to like come up with a better term that we are not colonizing them in a hard way, but we're colonizing the world through the culture, for example, through different discourses. And yeah, so sometimes we can use government and we can work with them, but we need to always be aware about how popular terms really like spoil and they change its meaning. And in these terms, it's yeah, it's also the problem for me. I'm kind of feel a little bit depressed and nervous about the whole discussion, because it feels like we are just sharing our examples of what we do. But I keep traveling last 5 years, and I keep listening to the same presentations everywhere, and feels like we all talk about the same things, and it feels like it's just a little bit pointless. And I just want to like maybe create a community and just discuss something really important, but I don't know how can we get there through all these language barriers. And yeah, so I feel, and yeah, it's not really comfortable chair and to sit, and yeah, but it's just I feel really uncomfortable. That's the problem. I'm sorry.
But I would be curious also on how we go beyond this stage of, I think many of us are at this level. Yes, sorry.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I make pageants about environmental justice with communities in Chicago. I think what you guys are all saying about artists dropping in internationally and having a month, taking away something, this really interesting way of using language about expedition and voyage is really on point and really, I think, damning about a lot of the ways that residencies and funding is set up across the world, certainly in the United States. I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about where you find there are moments of intersections for really meaningful and authentic cultural exchange. Because I think the intersectionality of how people are working on the same things together and how communities can talk to each other across the world is potentially really powerful, but I find it really difficult to understand how to move from the local myself, where I'm very rooted, to the global in a way that is not what you spoke so powerfully about being dropping in and dropping out. And if any of you have experiences or thoughts about how you do that.
I mean, I can talk a little bit about what our ultimate dream goal is, with our project. And in a way, we would just, myself anyway, I would just disappear. I mean, one of the things that we have sort of dreamt in a sort of utopic sense is to build this kind of, have this open source kind of communications infrastructure where, as it was, one of the genesis of us working there was a media artist, a filmmaker, Zacharias Canuck, who was the initial person that invited us to Igloolik to just visit. And he talked about how he didn't like to go south to visit or to edit his films or to go to film festivals or this or that. And he would just rather be out on the land, hunt, tell the stories. And he knew, he's like, there's satellites all over. Why can't I just connect to a satellite and beam my stuff to the south? Like, why do I even need to travel? And we said, well, this is where it was the genesis of our idea. And that's, I didn't get to talk about it a lot, but there's this idea of this mobile architecture built on a traditional Komutik sled. And we're slowly building these system of systems, this Sinuni thing to do data recording, but also to be able to record video and audio. There's satellite uplinks. There's also a renewable power generation system that we've designed. And we sort of build these systems and then give them away. And people are using them up in the north, and then they call us and let us know how they break, and we try to make them a little bit better. And so ultimately, like, if that vision was seen through and people around the circumpolar area were using it to talk to one another and to talk to us from the, everyone in the south, then that would be our solution, is that we wouldn't have to travel anymore and drop in and drop out. And, I mean, I think about it every time. Even taking the plane here, I thought, like, geez, all the people that converge in one place and the footprint. And then we have artists that are bringing ice, chipping 80 tons of ice away to let it melt here in Paris for a climate change conference. I thought, what's going on here? This seems really antithetical to the whole idea. I mean, the freon, the gasoline, the manpower. I thought we could just put a camera there if we wanted to watch ice melt. I mean, now I'm on a tangent, though, so maybe somebody else can answer that question.
There were always two more questions here.
Well, it was actually, I wanted to pick up on was it Anton or Igor? Your name is? Anton. Oh, there you are, you sitting on the comfortable chair. That's why I couldn't see you. I could hardly believe you're one of the youngest here. No, it's just picking up on that a bit, because I also think that why are we working with communities would be a question. I mean, why do we have to go and work with communities? There has to be a kind of diagnosis as to what are the circumstances that make us think we have to move, go there, work with them. Do they need us? Because there's something about that resembles development policies, where the people who want to do something create the need. It's not the people who are there. So it's like, I do think we have to move on towards looking deeper into what kind of communities. I mean, what you say, you're working with community in terms of becoming a citizen, and it's a more political action in terms of citizenship than going and visiting communities, which somehow even keeps them outside. You create a sort of inside-outside speciality when you work that way. So these are like fundamental questions that, of course, I don't have the answer for, but that I think we have to move forward and question, how do we create this notion of communities? Like, who do we call communities? Why is it the place where we live, not our community? So we go and visit somebody else's? Or, I mean, I don't think it's bad, or I'm not being judgmental. I'm just thinking that we have to sort of posing that we have to think deeper to why we're doing it, what we think is required, why. Are they calling us? Are they saying, oh, we really do need an artist?
Yeah, but when
they could. I mean,
yeah, and when they do, sometimes they also do. So yeah.
System are we working?
Okay, I'm Maya Faux, Translocal Institute, Budapest. At the moment, we're teaching planetary consciousness in practice to art students, and next year we'll be teaching visual cultures of Anthropocene to environmental science students. So we're working on in this area. But what struck me today is not just different communities, but the Chinese community and the need for nature. And what struck me is your strategy and the words, again, what you use about emotional plea to go back to nature. You called nature a sacred. And I wanted to ask about your spiritual return to nature. Why is that the strategy that you chose as most effective?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I feel a bit out of the situation because everybody is artist, but you live as artist, but I'm an architect, and actually what we are doing is not our full-time job. It's only our part-time hobby. It starts from hobby because all of us, we have 2 kids. And the community, I think what we are talking about in my case is also different. Because community, what we are creating is a virtual community. It's not a real community like neighborhoods or like physicals. They are families who live in the city and who can share the same living philosophy together with us. So now we have more than 1,000 family membership. So we have the forum and we share the events. So basically what I've shown, the bamboo pavilion and the rope on the trees, they are all completely starts from not buildings. It's actually from Chen Feng's very, very old philosophy about healthy food. Because there's a very interesting story. Because we all used to live in Europe, and when we returned to China, we found that it's so difficult to find healthy food. Organic food is just very precious, because everything they are made from the factory or really unhealthy. So we gather the family to look for healthy food. So that's how the trust established. I think the most tricky part is the trust of the community. Especially as time goes by, we, besides the food, we try to gather the kids and for hiking to travel around the whole China. And then we emphasize the trust because normally, like in China, every family only has 1 child. It's impossible to throw my kid to you for 24 hours. That's almost impossible because we don't trust each other normally. But after some years, the community can share the trust that the whole the workshop we have done, basically, so the parents can be out of the site. The kids can follow us, they trust us. So we establish the trust of the community from the food and then from the kids. And that's the fundamental of what we are doing. Because imagine impossible, in China, you allow a 10-year-old kid to use like a machine to build. Probably in Europe that's quite fine, especially in Germany, but in China, I mean, they are not allowed to touch the ground. They are completely be cut out of nature. So what we are doing is try to share our ideas and get more family as part of our community. So our community are still growing, and it's a completely non-beneficial project. We are not funded, and we try to fund ourselves from the food, and we share the traveling, and each family can pay a little bit as kind of a fee for traveling and organizations. So that's why I think the other feeling I feel that many of us looks not so happy or looks very precious. But for me, I think art or as artist, the most important thing is to be happy. If you're not happy, don't be an artist. Do happy thing.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
A major theme, obviously, from this afternoon and also from this morning is the capitalist system, which is behind so many of the, well, all of the problems and issues. You mentioned Zizek this morning, and you've just used the word diagnosis, which I think is very, very apposite. And Sorry, I should have said I'm Scott. I work for Creative Scotland, which is the public agency for the arts and screen in Scotland. I used to run, amongst other things, a residency program, and one of the things I was keen to do, like many of you here, is to sponsor collaborations between scientists and artists, and we did a number of those. I wonder, though, if we're if we want to go through that diagnosis, then we should be looking a bit deeper, as you've just said, and the issue is economics, law, policy, the capture of governments by the corporate system, and also, as you quite rightly pointed out, what goes on in our heads, the memes, if you like, the symbols, which underlie all of that and help all of us to believe that the capitalist system is the only narrative, if you like. So, should we be thinking about residencies with economists, lawyers, policymakers, advertisers, public relations professionals, and so on?
Yeah, that's a very good suggestion. Yeah, it's a bit difficult to react on that. I think there are some models emerging in terms of residency program that work also more with, well, not only scientists, but also humanities on a very, very general sense, but also political scientists, and not necessarily as far as you went in your suggestion right now, but I think it's definitely something that should be explored, and that Città dell'Arte, for instance, in Italy, is exploring more and more in the programs that they are developing, but it is something that is still too little when we see the scope of what we are doing right now, that it should probably be explored a bit more. I have two more people who wanted to speak, and then we will try to wrap up, because it's a bit, coming close to the end of the day.
I don't know, I may be a little off topic now, but I kind of felt the urge to say a couple of things when on this community topic. The word community, the way we're using it, didn't exist in our language before the donors came. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Zoya. I worked in development for many, many, many years now. I live in Macedonia, and I've lived internationally and worked internationally. So the word community didn't exist as such. You know, as the wall came down and donors started coming wanting to fund NGOs to do democratization and development, then we had to understand what they meant by community. And I think now the whole thing has changed, really, the language, and now it's become more of part of our vocabulary. And it is part of intercourse. And a lot of the people who work in development in the country use this jargon and also speak half English, half Macedonian, because this is part of their daily life. But also community, the way maybe existed in a way, doesn't really exist that much anymore, at least in our environment, due to, first of all, a great deal of migration, where people are not like in the village or whatever. They have moved a lot to the cities. They emigrate and immigrate. So the whole idea of community is new, but it has also changed. What I find very important, and I don't really have a question here, but what I find very important is, first of all, people are willing to hear what others are doing, and they often need this as a source of new ideas. But it is hard to then tell them what to do. It takes time for people to adopt these new ideas and find how to implement them in their lives. And What I think is most important, and I have tried to apply in my work, and you know, this is something we can talk more about, is how to avoid this. Okay, we come from the West, we do come with more money. How do we put this on an equal footing, really, and make this a dialogue instead of, okay, so we're going to show you, you know, what is the good thing to do. I think that is one of the main things, and to be more listening rather than saying, okay, you know, we are here to fix things. That's all. Thank you.
One of you want to react on this point?
I was thinking about the collective body as a way to understand local environments, local ecosystems that, you know, when we speak about community, we think about a group of people, but, you know, collective bodies include also the extra human, the stones, the winds, the rivers, the ice, the people who have passed and the people who are to come, right? And so I think what perhaps people working from the culture locally, or even people who arrive as aliens and stay for a bit, what we can do is these kind of agents is probably be glues or tendons to this collective body, even if it's temporary. Yeah.
Thank you.
I will respond to what you mentioned about the idea of not telling what to do and finding a way to listen. My experience in the IFA projects I have done, actually the whole base of IFA project is about celebrating a culture of cultures. Because what I experienced as an artist and as a curator working in Europe, in the Western part, was the difficulty of having dialogue on a mutual level. I think what is missing is reciprocity in exchange. And so the question is, how can institutions be willing, or how can they be open to the possibility of exchange based on mutual respect? Because that's where, in my experience, the challenge is. And when I think of the idea of the community, for example, doing this big project we are doing in 60 countries, myself and many other artists I'm working with are all concerned about what is happening in our global community right now. And I'm talking about our world, looking at us here. What is happening? And if I look at it from the artistic part, looking, for example, at the situation in the Netherlands, the cultural institutions or the museum or cultural centers are exclusive. They are not inclusive of communities. They are not representative of what is happening in society. And with all this exclusivity, while culture has the power to actually transform people and create conscious societies, that gap, which is happening right now, to me, is actually one of the reasons why our world is in trouble, because we are artists, we are creators, we are residency programs, we are cultural institutions, we are museums, but we are incapable of actually reaching diverse communities and communicating and opening things up. So the discussion is not happening, which brings back to what this artist said about he keeps hearing the same discussions and everywhere. So actually, what are we doing?
But I think I will very briefly reflect on everything, because the discussions and the exchanging of the experiences, it's still something. I mean, we are going back to our countries and we are implementing some maybe similar ideas what we have heard in gathering. I mean, it is not just listening and waiting for something. We go back and we act. And I think this is very important, to exchange.
We have time, I would like to react to the idea of community, because our works are based on a very clear idea about community, at least something that is playing a role to guide us. For us, we use the word community very similar to that used by the ecological science, which is, you know, a number of species living together in an environment, in a habitat. Only now that, of course, it consists of different individuals. But what we think is important about a community is that the individuals, members, share certain resources, and that when something wrong with the environment and the resources, it's immediately felt by the individual member. For example, sharing of a well. Actually, our place shares well with the surrounding neighbors. In that sense, we are using the word community not only as a locus, but also as perhaps a possible critique towards the state, which is in post-colonial situation, is a project, basically, as an imagined community, in the word of Benedict Anderson. And I think community is also an important way to critique the market, because when you share things in a community, you know exactly how much you are using, and you know if you are using too much, you are actually causing problems, which is not the case when we are imagining the whole marketplace as a global marketplace, for example. And the third is, of course, community is important for us to critique ourselves, to critique our desire. Because when we go beyond a certain limit, we know something is impacting our neighbors and in return ourselves. So we are using that particular sense of community. So actually we are rejecting the use of the word in European community, ASEAN community, international community, global community, because exactly it is blurring the idea of the common eco, the common house, the eco, the environment. I think, well, I hope that adds to something to this conversation. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nabil Ahmed. I'm here thanks to your initiative. It's really great to hear a lot of the experiences and stories, particularly from Colombia and from the north. Just to perhaps offer another perspective, right? Just coming from the work that I do, perhaps it's also quite relevant, following on this idea that colonialism and capitalism is very much processes and acts of violence that produces bodies, whether that's human or non-human, or whether that's the living or the dead. So in that sense, a community, right, is also the dead, who died from a particular kind of violence, whether it's a state violence or whether it's capitalism, and so on. So, so in that sense, how do you sort of get the dead to speak, or who speaks on their behalf? That brings, you know, a set of radical sort of questions, right? And the work that I'm part of a group called Forensic Architecture, based at Goldsmiths in London, and the work we do is to produce kind of spatial forensics that can be used to mobilize evidence towards a very particular forum, which is a legal forum. Whether, but it's important to note that in the cases where there's not a legal case, it is in fact the production of the evidence is a political act towards the making of a forum. And there, the architecture is not, let's say, building, but rather to look at forms of evidence that can be sort of mobilized, right? How, you know, not to sort of think about the city as only the urban. So, you know, contaminations that flow into rivers and so on is very much urban processes also at work. And so sort of to shift this relationship between the figure and the ground, right? And then to perhaps bring questions of agency on the table and mobilize architecture in this specific way. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't know if there are really urgent question or urgent remark that someone wants to make, but it's 4:45 and we have the two reporters from the two other sessions. I would really like to be able to wrap up the conversation and try to find a few keywords, which I think is quite impossible and not really what we wish for anyway. I think the topic of community is indeed, I mean, how to define, how to know what kind of language we're using and be careful of what language we use are issues that we need to keep in mind, especially in my case, when I work for an organization, which is quite different from other people we had in the panel. Yeah, Sophia, you can help me if you want.
Yeah, I mean, the audience and the speakers, they are all somehow linked to community and to public spaces. I mean, as a summarizing, I would say that we have just to continue our jobs and do it properly as we did before, but really stay in touch in keeping contact to each other and develop maybe some new ideas or some new exchanges. And because we heard many interesting points of view or project initiatives, and I mean, this is also very important to listen to our guests, because this is also part of development of our jobs which is related to public space, to community, to art, to environment. And this is everything connected to each other, economy or biology, science or whatever. And I would like to invite our guests from the neighbor panels.
Yeah, I will start with the panel which was on the sustainable funding models. I don't remember exactly the title, but I will let you explain briefly what has been happening during this panel. So she has 5 minutes to tell us what it was about and what were the key ideas that came out of it, and then Ruben folks will do the same for the second working group as well. So here you go.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I was attending to the sustainable business models for cultural and creative sector. When I left, they were actually trying to establish a list of what were the keywords. So I don't know what are their keywords, but I will try to figure them out with what I heard. So the main question of the workshop was about, like the first premise context was, there is huge public funds cuts, so there is reasons to find new ways to sustain oneself without compromising with integrity or without being too dependent on public money. In other words, how can cultural and creative sectors survive? Several networks were presented, several answers to the question, what do we test for changes? And the central points were partnering up, sharing beyond the own benefits of each, let's say, network. So several organizations were presented. I won't go through them all. One of the first things that hit me was the broad use of the word ecosystem. One of the main points that was brought up by each group and each partner, each association organization, was the necessity of networking, of creating smart ecosystems. To be, some of them were, like most of them wanted to become the main mediators between the social, environmental, and communicators of the different actions that were put in place all around the world. Like main principles was to bring people together, to mapping the different and many collaborative projects, and to mapping collaborative economy frameworks built up with like strong values and common values. On the question of the financial models, how did these different organizations and associations actually manage to find their funds? Different models were presented. Some were helped through club of investors, some through public funds, some through business angels. Others were volunteers in the beginning and then developed global partnerships. Then partnerships were like found depending on each subject of the different networks of collaborators. Yes, some of them, like the movement POC21, didn't have one partnership specifically, but several, which helped us to maintain and sustain their integrity and their independence facing what they were aimed to build. We could say we're also brought up the different challenges of running collaborative projects and how to solve these different challenges. Like how to avoid the hidden hierarchy among horizontal group and decision making, how to avoid hidden power structures, and yes.
Can I interrupt you just briefly? Is this something that you recognize also in terms of the struggle with the funding? Yeah, I see everyone nodding. Okay.
Yeah, I guess maybe if you had more precise questions or something you want to know about, like about these business models, because I can go into the details, but then it would take a little time, so I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we are a bit, bit down from 3 hours of talking and listening a lot also.
Yeah, sure.
So I think for some people it's a bit tough also to come to questions. Yeah, you can take the mic here.
And this had to do with one of the questions you posed through the email, asking how can funding become more sustainable, and just thinking a particular example of in Colombia that we're being displaced by dams and we're being displaced by development. It's very hard to find funding to purchase land. And that's what we really need right now in Colombia. We need a ownership, collective ownership over land. So if there's any donors here, it's very difficult to find money to, you can find money to a residency or to travel or to buy equipment, but not to buy land. And that would be a pressing issue for, I guess, a lot of people in Colombia and I suppose in the rest of Latin America or the global south.
In the Gala project that we did, we finished in May this year, and we had a tiny bit money left at the end. And what we commissioned on the move, so we commissioned Marie to make a Gala funding guide, so trying to map what kind of funding sources exist which are not specific to the cultural sector as well, to try to bridge, especially on those questions that, well, indeed you can find money for your, if you're lucky, let's say, you can find money for your art project, you can find money to cover your travels, but then if you really want to do something with the ecology, with the environment, or with the community, then there are other funding mechanisms that you don't have time to research as an artist or as an art institution. So that's why we tried also to use a little bit of money we had left to commission someone to research this. It was focused on Europe. We did as much as we could in the given, the time we had and the money we had, but I think it's something also, at least I can say from the organization we worked with in the term of building a knowledge alliance, was also trying to share information on where to find sources of funding that don't match for non-profit, for collective organization, but nevertheless try to make use of other funding lines.
And when
it is on the Gala website, and on the move as well.
When I say land, it's actually, of course, a plot of land, or if it's in an urban setting, an apartment, a building, a house. where you can establish a productive project.
Yeah.
And that way, money starts entering the collective, and then you don't have to depend on funds, right? So a place to establish a productive project where you're not going to be displaced from, and where, you know, you do what you know best, farming, fishing, doing banners, whatever it is that you printing, press, whatever, no?
If I can just make one remark. I think it's great that you're collecting places that we can maybe find, at least there's the potential for funding from a different stream, but as an artist, I think my problem is, and what I've seen from other artists, is that we can't access that funding stream because we don't have the background to do that. So, and it just occurred to me that one of the things that could be really valuable in terms of these kinds of collaborations and partnerships is that, you know, some imaginary beautiful organization could find ethical partners to, you know, that would have that background, that could have access to those funding streams of, you know, from science or from, you know, I think of science because I know it seems like there's a lot of money there, but it's hard to find those partners that are ethical, that don't just want to have the figurehead artists, like, oh, we're doing some wacky project with some artists, and all the money goes into their research project at a university or something, which I've experienced before as well. So that would be I would love to see that as an alternative strategy or a real strategy.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I have to give the mic also to the other group.
Okay, so I'm also going to try and condense a 3-hour very intensive discussion ranging very widely geographically and conceptually into 5 minutes. And the title of our panel was Green Process versus Green Contents. And immediately the kind of this question was expanded on in the beginning. First of all, it was mentioned that everything is content, everything is process. Was one question. Also, there was a debate about what does process mean, and with the idea that process can vary kind of geographically in terms of the kind of art practices you're talking about, and also in terms of the specific environmental issues that are being dealt with. And then cutting to the end, the question that somehow was left hanging over our panel was the one, what of what we're doing is just tinkering at the edges? So like all the practices that we heard about through this discussion, you know, this sort of self-doubt, like what if it's just tinkering, just doing little things on the edges? Are we actually going to do anything meaningful? Okay, and in between these questions and the kind of dilemma at the end, we heard about a lot of interesting practices. I'll just try and pick out some aspects just to give you a flavor of the discussion downstairs. So we heard about these kind of large-scale projects going on in Nantes and the attempt to kind of scale up ecological activism and art eco-activism to actually have an effect, a kind of real quantifiable effect on a city. We also heard about a project in Kosovo, in Mitrovica in Kosovo, and what was for me particularly interesting in that project was the way that ecology and ecological issues and these environmental projects were also a way to bring together two warring communities, you know, i.e. the Kosovo Albanian community and the Serbian community, who were divided by a river in Mitrovica, and ecology was a way to somehow bridge that divide. We also heard about a very interesting presentation also on festivals in Aix-en-Provence, and really very concrete examples about how to technically try and make festivals more sustainable in terms of the kind of materials that are used. And they realized, they did a kind of a survey, and they realized the biggest problem is transport and travel, but they can't do much about that. So they really tried to deal with their own waste, and in particular focusing on set design. And so there was a lot of very interesting information about how they tried to like have a cyclical attitude to set design and reuse as much as they could. And by the end, I mean, recently they managed to create a set for a production at their theatre festival that was 97% recyclable, and the 3% that was not recyclable was the kind of corniche on something which had to be done from polystyrene. So that was an interesting example. We also heard about the Basurama projects, and these are people who based in Spain, in Madrid, who work with trash, i.e. garbage, trash, and their projects are all about changing attitudes to trash, and also based on the principle of play rather than kind of making people afraid. They say, we are in love with trash. So that was kind of their approach. And then there was a presentation more by a scientist who talked about her experience having been to her first COP event, COP5, 16 years ago, and how people are still, she gave quite an impassioned talk about how people are still talking about the same issues, patting themselves on the back for we're talking about the most important issues in the world, but actually emissions have doubled in that period. And that was a kind of a little bit of a depressing note, that we can do everything we want. We can, you know, improve the sustainability of our arts sector, but actually at the same time we've been doing that. That's all offset by the overall increase in emissions. And she made this point about how the climate skepticism is greater now than ever, and the arts have a real role to play in reconnecting and trying to combat climate skepticism. I must just quickly also mention there was also a very interesting presentation about arts admin in London and the very important work they do, including their 2 Degrees Festival, which in terms of content and also process, about how they work very hard using green teams to make their institution more environmental in its working practices.
It seems that there are a lot of both very depressing thoughts and at the same time very positive events being developed in, if I can summarize in a very, very like one sentence what you are saying right now.
Definitely. So there was this kind of balance between worrying about is it enough, is what we're doing actually making any real difference or not, and also trying to find some positive examples. And the panel really was full of very positive examples of artists and arts institutions trying to change, learning from each other, maybe being the seed for further change in a city and in culture in general. So shall I leave it there?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks to all of you. Well, we have to cut it short, but there are drinks right now, and I think many of us can continue discussing about certain topic more one-on-one and trying to go a step further that might not have been there necessarily in all the discussions. So thank you very much for all of you to be here and to share the information about your project. It was really, really amazing, and yeah.
Stop the event at 5 p.m. exactly, so this is why we were a bit in a hurry. But that's okay. Yeah. And now we join in the